Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Sophia, your host. As you know, we're in the middle of a series on misunderstood Quranic verses, and we are following the story of the children of Israel, their rise, their corruption, and their destruction. We are continuing with chapter 17. We're looking at verse 104, which talks about the final promise. And we want to find out, what is that final promise? Does it refer to a future event? Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
I'm going to read to you one translation of the verse, Dr. Shabir, and then we can discuss it.
Sure.
So here's one translation. It goes like this. It's a Muhammad Asad translation. And after that, we said unto the children of Israel, dwell now securely on earth. But remember that when the promise of the last day shall come to pass, we shall bring you forth as parts of a motley crowd. That's the Muhammad Asad translation. There's another translation, Ali Kuli Qara'i translation. After him, we said to the children of Israel, take up residence in the land, and when the occasion of the other promise comes, we shall gather you in mixed company. So it seems from this verse that this promise is yet to come, right? It seems from these translations. Tell me what you think.
Yeah,
Dr. Shabir.
so classical Muslim commentators on the Quran generally thought of the term akhirah, which is a common term that Muslims use,
Yes.
right, for life hereafter. Even those who don't speak Arabic, we know dunya and akhirah,
Yes.
this world, life hereafter. So the wa'd al-akhirah, it seems to be the promise of the life hereafter here. And then the imagery of the Day of Judgment that we have is that people will all be gathered together from all nations and everything, and then they'll be in the judgment court of God. So with that in mind, naturally the Muslim commentators thought that this verse is a reference to the life hereafter.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go with the Arabic, we can focus more on the details of the verse. It says, وَقُلْنَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ. And after him, that is after Pharaoh, we said to the people of Israel, Uskunul ard, dwell in the land in tranquility or in security. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ الْآخِرَةِ جِئْنَا بِكُمْ لَفِيفًا. And when the final promise comes, or the promise of the hereafter comes, according to the Muslim commentators, then we will bring you together as a motley crowd,
Mm-hmm.
a crowd made up of many distinct varieties of people. So they took it to be the life hereafter, but it doesn't have to mean that. Now, those who want to say, well, the promise in Surah 17, verse number 7, the same surah, but the 7th verse earlier in this chapter, that there's going to be a second destruction, and that second destruction is yet to come. And they think that partly because with the present verse number 104, towards the end of the chapter, there seems to be a reference to a much future event. Even if it's not the life hereafter, then it must be a final promise, like taking it literally, must be a final promise. Wa'dul akhirah, the promise of the final thing. So they say we must go back to verse number 7 of the same surah, and because the same wording is used, Wa'dul akhirah, then in the early part, verse number 1, verse number 7 of the same surah, that mention of what we're calling the second promise there, that must also be a promise of a future event, right? Sometime into our future. I would say, okay, let's give credence to the fact that the two verses use the same term, and it's a good idea to interpret them in the light of each other because they use the same term, same surah. It looks like there's a connection here. Moreover, there is a connection not only with this term, but also with the beginning verses of this chapter and the verses towards the end of the chapter. In fact, I just mentioned the Pharaoh, and at the beginning part of this chapter, there was a history of the Bani Israel, the children of Israel, and here too we're dealing with the history of the Bani Israel. But it seems then that what the earlier verses of this chapter are dealing with should be inserted within the narrative that comes at the end of this chapter. In other words, there is a mention of Pharaoh, the way he was oppressing the Israelite people. God drowned the Pharaoh and his entourage and saved the people of Israel and told them to dwell in the land. So now even though this comes at the end of the surah, it looks like the early part of the history is at the end of the surah, and the later history is at the beginning of the surah. Because from this point onwards, God can say to them, you know what? Okay, so I saved you now, but I can see where you're heading, given your character traits, given the way that you are responding to your prophet Moses, and so on. It looks like this is what you're going to do. You're going to cause corruption on the earth twice. When the first promise comes, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be destroyed. And then I'll revive you as a nation. And then you will grow in strength and power. And then you will cause that corruption again. And then I will send some of my servants against you again. And then that's going to be the second of the two promised destructions due to your own recalcitrance and high-handedness on the earth. So verse number 7 of this surah then speaks of that second of the two. And it would seem that that's the same thing that is mentioned here in verse number 104. It's the second of the two. We can say the last of the two. It's the same thing, right? So it's saying 6 on one hand, half dozen on the other, same expression, right? So because we're dealing with only two events, this is the last of the two. So that's why it says Wa'dul Akhirah, the last of the two. And so we're still within the classical interpretation, which says basically that Surah 17, verse number 7, is about a past event. It doesn't need to be reinterpreted to make it mean a future event. And verse number 104 is speaking about that same past event. It's not necessarily about the life hereafter, although we can say that Quranic expressions can have multiple meanings, and sometimes, there is another shade to be entertained for that purpose as well, to say, okay, looking at it a different way, there's a hint here about the life hereafter. Now, if we take it to be a past event, which I'm taking it to be, then how were the people of Israel gathered as a motley crowd? Now, the New Testament shows that there were a variety of peoples. There were Pharisees, there were Sadducees, there were Zealots, there were Sicarii, there were Herodians. People were called by different group names.
So they were all part of the children of Israel.
And they were all gathered together in a motley crew, right? At that time, with the destruction of the temple in between the years 66 to 70 under the Roman ruler Titus. So the two have already transpired. But if some people are looking at the destruction that is going on at the moment and thinking, oh, well, wait a minute, God can't let this just happen and do nothing. God is going to bring people to justice, even if the international criminal courts fail in doing anything like this. Well, verse number 8 of this same surah says, وَإِنْ وَتَّمُدْنَا, and if you return, then we will return. And this could mean that if you return to your high-handedness on the land, then we will return to sending some of our servants against you, who will cause the kinds of destruction which our servants did before.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Muslim Media Hub, the new home of Let the Quran Speak.
Here we spread positivity and good. We help people experience the beauty of Islam and help them appreciate and understand Muslims.
This beautiful building we purchased at cost $2.3 million.
Yeah, we've already raised a third of that money, and with your help, inshallah, we can pay off the rest.
So we're looking for people who can give $1,000 each. If you can be part of the select group, that's amazing.
Otherwise, just please give whatever you can. Every dollar counts.
It's our collective responsibility to share the message of Islam with our fellow human beings. Please help us continue this good work.
It's a sadaqah jariyah, something that will continue to be a benefit to the Muslim community long after Safiya and I are gone.
Please support our work at muslimmediahub.com.
Your support is zakat eligible and tax deductible.
May Allah bless you and your loved ones today and always. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.